There were some issues with gender politics in the negotiations. You want to talk to us about it because they're quite amusing, and but I think they show some of the sort of hard-edged games that gets played at negotiations.
First of all, as I say in the book, the Russians were not the most difficult problem from my perspective. They are tough negotiators. They are excellent diplomats. My counterpart, Anatoly Antonov, very experienced hand. He'd been the director of the Office of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, responsible for arms control and nonproliferation for some time. He has a reputation in Washington, where he is now the ambassador of the Russian Federation, of being a very tough and, I must say, sometimes nasty diplomat to deal with. So he can definitely get those hard-edged messages across without too much problem. But in my case, I think we were lucky, he and I, that I had just spent 3 years in Moscow as the director of the Carnegie Moscow Center. I was outside of government, but nevertheless, I invited him from time to time to come and speak at Carnegie. We'd had opportunities, informal opportunities, to have lunch and get together and talk over arms control policy in an informal way. So I think that acquaintance really helped to smooth the way for us getting to the negotiating table and starting working right away. Oftentimes, there's a kind of kabuki dance that goes on as you're trying to get to know your counterpart at the negotiating table. Now, the problem we ran into between Antonov and me was on account of, in this case, some Russian media attention, where a Russian military newspaper put out a kind of nasty article saying, oh, you know, the Americans have this woman heading up their delegation. She's really tough. Our side's never going to be able to get the better of her. I call it the tough girl negotiator incident. As a matter of fact, it was not directed at me, this article. I think it was directed at Anatoly. For some reason, somebody was after him. So I knew that there would be two options. One, that he would be removed and replaced by somebody else. Then I would have to start that kabuki dance. The other possibility was that there would be some tough games on his side, as he had to prove to his own side, as well as to us, that he was indeed a tough negotiator. Luckily, it was those really mischievous and very tough games that ensued. They were hard to get through. He was shutting me out of important meetings in the Kremlin. That type of thing was going on, but we got through it, and we came back to work together, I think, with a good degree of mutual, again, respect, but also mutual confidence, which even developed further during the negotiations, as both of us had to solve tough problems with our delegations and with our capitals. I'll just mention one thing that was super surprising to me was how much pressure I came under on the US side for needing to show that I could be tough with the Russians. And the men on my delegation went after me after several plenaries where I was just being very serious and, you know, making my points, but I wasn't really getting angry. And so my guys said, you have got to show some spirit. You've got to show some anger at the negotiating table so the Russians know you mean business. So one day I decided to comply, and I just, you know, shouted at the Russians because they kept bringing up missile defense constraints, which were not part of our initial instructions. Our initial instructions from Medvedev and Obama were very clear in London. This negotiation would be about reducing strategic offensive forces, nothing to do with missile defenses. So they kept bringing this up and bringing this up. I finally just threw a tantrum one day, and my men afterwards were jubilant. They said, you turned bright red. The Russians were really surprised. That's great. And I thought, all right, fine. I never really had to throw a tantrum again, although I did once later in the negotiations when the Russians took some important compromises off the table in November of 2009. But I never had to throw another tantrum. That was a lesson for me. Sometimes you do have to engage a little street theater to address some concerns maybe among your own camp.